Oh boy, not a lot of people happy with Soulframe. Look, I think that over the last few years, with as many games that we've seen come out, especially live service games, because every single one of these companies want a piece of that live service pie. Of course, makes a lot of money, makes a lot of sense. As such, as consumers, we become a little bit more defensive. We throw up a shield because our time, money, and attention are incredibly valuable to us and in limited supply, and as such, we've started to critically analyze these games, as we should. We start trying to judge them for what they are. But it helps when we actually understand what these games are in the first place, and that's the biggest problem when it comes to Soulframe. I've seen all the reaction videos, the comments, and the threads online about Soulframe, and while the criticisms I don't think are necessarily wrong, they're rooted in the wrong place. And there's also this like odd jubilation over a game being dead before a game even exists in the first place, and that's kind of odd. I want to talk about that. But I actually got the opportunity to sit down and talk with the developers of Soulframe and Warframe about their games and the future of those games. And in that, I realized that there was critical context that they left out that would make this whole situation around Soulframe make a heck of a lot more sense to a lot more people. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Look, you don't need that context. You don't even need to have a background in game development to understand whether you do or don't like something or why you don't like something. But in case you did want to have that kind of background, well, you could use today's sponsor, boot.dev. Now, I dropped out of game design school. If you're anything like me and have struggled with the monotony of online courses, boot.dev is here to change that, and I wish I found it sooner. Boot.dev tackles the hardest problem with e-learning, boredom. They've built their platform using modern game design tactics, making it feel like you're diving into an RPG adventure while mastering back-end development with Python and Go. You gain experience, level up, earn achievements, and compete on a global leaderboard while chasing your dreams in development and having fun while doing it. The best part? Boot.dev ensures that you're writing tons of code. These hands-on lessons balance theory with practice. You're not just learning, you're doing. Worried about committing? No problem. Boot.dev offers a 30-day, no-questions-asked refund policy with free demos for every course. And the best part is, clicking the link in the description of this video and using my code, Legendary Drops, gets you 25% off your first payment to boot.dev. That's 25% off your first month or your first year, depending on what subscription you choose. So what are you waiting for? Click the link and start your adventure today. Soulframe is Digital Extreme's first game since Warframe, which released over a decade ago by now. It's going to be free to play, live service, MMO light, action, RPG with open world and procedural dungeons. Think Warframe, but more melee focused with a strong lean into fantasy, where you are the protagonist and you're collecting spirits of your ancestors to imbue you with unique powers, taking on different enemies, and trying to heal a broken world. I want to start this off by saying Digital Extremes doesn't like using alpha or beta language, most likely because it gives too solid of a timeline for a game's release. However, with that said, they've been developing Soulframe for 2 to 2.5 years, and what we're seeing I would most likely consider to be pre-alpha gameplay, and with that sort of context, the picture for Soulframe becomes a lot more clear. Looking at the visual polish, the voice acting, NPC animations, environment, atmosphere, and everything else, it's not hard to come to the assumption that this game could be slated to release next year or even sooner than that. However, with what we've been shown and what they've allowed players to test, what they call preludes, this is merely a vertical slice of the game showcasing different systems, narrative pieces, missions, and the overall direction of the game. This game is likely years off from release at this point, and it's not a good look for Digital Extremes to not make that abundantly clear to players so they can temper their expectations when they're seeing gameplay. We've seen developers show alpha and pre-alpha gameplay of their games with considerably less backlash, no matter how rough it looked, because we know what we're looking at is more concept than concrete. I think a great example of this is the highly anticipated MMO Ashes of Creation. Watching early development videos, we see how clunky and uncanny the movement is, how unfinished the animations are, but we don't put much stock into it because we know what stage in development the game is at and how these games and how these different things can change over time. So the question is, why would Digital Extremes show off anything related to the game at this point if there's so much to be criticized? Well, because similarly to the beloved Larian Studios who involved players early with Divinity Original Sin 2 and later Baldur's Gate 3, Digital Extremes seeks to develop this game alongside the player. Get players on the ground floor, show them what the process looks like, and have them help you make the game that they want to play. I'd like to give a reminder that Baldur's Gate 3 was never the shining jewel of the industry, at least not when it was first being developed. In early access, it was rough, broken, and at times unrecognizable from the game that we have today.
Be a little more careful. That skin's valuable, and we won't always be watching.
Digital Extremes is one of the very few companies that are out there outside of Larian Studios and a handful of others that really lean on their community to help them develop a game. To be honest, it's exactly what we want. We want to be involved with these projects because their aim is to deliver what we actually want to play. How many games have you guys seen over the last few years that you see trailers for, you see gameplay of, and you go, who is this made for? And that's what they're trying to avoid. Again, that's something that we want. We want games to be made for us, and we want our feedback to actually mean something. And in this case, it will mean something. But I think the issue with communication with this game is the fact that in a lot of the cases, they're speaking to their fan base. They're speaking to the players that understand what they're doing. The players that play Warframe know exactly what DE is trying to do with Soulframe. The general market have no idea. And if you're not making it critically clear that this game is in very early development, well, then the rest of the industry is going to look at it and go, wow, this doesn't look right. And for good reason, because there are a lot of things to criticize with this game. But again, it is Digital Extreme's responsibility to make sure that they're letting people know how far this game is into development. And when you're just dropping trailers out there with zero context, well, people aren't going to know, and they're going to criticize it as it stands. And rightfully so. Again, the stuff that we've seen in the trailer, there's a lot to judge there. There's a lot of feedback for us to give, and we need to give it. But I think that the overall temperature of the room when it comes to how hot a lot of people got when they saw this trailer, well, that would really been toned down if they would have just said, hey, this is pre-alpha. It paints this in an entirely different picture. We don't need context to know whether or not we do or don't like something. That's not our responsibility. That is the responsibility of the developers to give that kind of context so we know what we're looking at and then can judge it based on that. Now, that's not saying that the game doesn't have some things it needs to work on. It definitely does. I agree with the vast majority of criticisms that I've seen. In fact, I shared mine when I sat down with Digital Extremes talking to the developers of both Soulframe and Warframe, making it a point to share my grievances when it came to the game's combat. After watching the first trailer and the most recent one, I can clearly see the DNA of Warframe's melee, and personally, I don't think it belongs anywhere near this game. It's stagnant, robotic, it lacks fluidity, it lacks everything that you would expect from a third-person action game where melee seems to be the primary focus, and even more so when that game is in 2024. It's easy to forgive the melee in Warframe because of the game's movement, the wide variety of weapons, and character-specific abilities. However, when players have been spoiled by FromSoft's combat for years and are used to more polished, natural-feeling movement and character reactions, you can't expect them to take a step back, even if the game is in early development, and that's a lesson that they should be learning from Warframe. Why do players still play Warframe 10 years later? It's because the game feels great to play, and the studio has supported it and its community tirelessly. Fidelity, narrative, and a good reputation can only take you so far. If it feels bad to play, or in the case of Soulframe, it looks bad to play, players aren't going to play it. And if your messaging isn't clear, they may never try it after seeing the trailers. I can easily overlook the bright shining lights in the trailer because I've seen it in other games. It's visual artifacting, lens flare more than anything else. Hell, I can give a pass to the weird slide and miss with the execution animation that was shown in the trailer. However, something nobody can let go of is how odd and uncanny the combat animations are for both the player character and the enemies. It seems like it's stuck in an odd place between Souls games and Monster Hunter, where it looks like it wants to be more fluid and reactive, but doesn't follow through because they want the players to commit to attacks, and the end result is an animation that looks like it's cut short in motion. Enemies don't react naturally to attacks, and the player character doesn't react naturally to theirs. Everything visually in the world of Soulframe is screaming that this combat should be more like a dance, free-flowing, fluid motions. However, it just looks janky. You'd expect more follow-through with some of the attacks, timed releases into a dodge or into another attack, but visually there just isn't enough motion here. While the developers have come out to say this is not by any means a Souls game, there are a ton of great examples on what melee combat in a game like this should look like, and this just isn't it. When you compile the horrid-looking combat with the game's distinct art style, interesting narrative, highly detailed character design, solid music, voice acting, and overall polish outside of combat animations, you get the feeling that the studio is putting too much effort into the things that matter the least to players. Gameplay always comes first. You can develop the greatest game in the world, however, if that game isn't fun to play or it doesn't feel good to play, nobody's gonna play it. Now, initially, I wasn't even going to make a video about this. I was maybe going to make a short video just talking about Soulframe or conversations that I had with a couple of the developers while I was over at TennoCon, but I saw the traction that it got, how hot people got over seeing the trailer, and I'm happy about it. Because if it wasn't for that kind of backlash and that kind of outrage, there's a really good chance that people's criticisms or people's just general feel of the game wouldn't have been heard by Digital Extremes, and it's something that's desperately needed in this game. And I want the game to be good. Digital Extremes wants the game to be good. But one of the things that I'm slightly afraid of is the fact that now that I've gotten to know the community for Warframe and for Digital Extremes, I've noticed that they love this company. And rightfully so. They both treat each other as exactly how you'd want a community and a game developer to treat one another. It's the perfect example of the most ethical live service relationship between players and developer. But at the same time, what ends up happening with that is that the players that may be testing Soulframe may not be criticizing it the way that they should because they're holding their punches. They know what the devs are working on. They know how hard the devs are working. They've probably met some of these developers a couple of times or something like that, and they don't want to hurt their feelings or anything. And I totally understand that. But at the exact same time, this was the perfect moment, the perfect time for them to get the general audience involved in this game because they need people that are not fans of Warframe and not fans of Digital Extremes interested in this game, because that's who this game is made for. This game isn't made for the players that are already playing Warframe. This is a game that's targeted at an audience that they don't already have. And to be honest with you, a fantasy leaning, slow, more, melee combat focused live service, open world, action RPG, MMO light, all those different things combined. There's a lot of players that are out there right now that are looking for a game like this. And if this game can deliver, it's going to make a lot of people happy. And they want it to be good. We all want it to be good. And I'd like to restore a little bit of faith that may have been lost because of the trailer and the lack of feedback that Digital Extremes gave. Now, before recording this video, Soulframe developers posted a video to their YouTube channel, and they pinned a comment saying, "Envoys new and old, welcome to Soulframe. Our first dev stream is done, and now we're back to making the game in our version of pre-alpha preludes. What you might expect over the next few months is refined combat, focus on fun, and dramatic experiments with gameplay. If this is your first time checking out a Digital Extremes game, this is how we develop. Buckle in." Many of you might know Warframe. We didn't add bullet jumping to Warframe until 3 years into development. Expect the same risks, changes, and pace with Soulframe. We love and read all feedback. See you in Alka. Digital Extremes' evolving approach to game development as well as its community outreach is a rarity. They listen, they truly listen, and sometimes they're listening even when you aren't even talking. Warframe only vaguely resembles the game it used to be. At its initial release, it was a stealth shooter, slow and methodical, incredibly pay-to-win, horrible monetization, lacking content, and had no narrative. Today, Warframe might be the most ethically monetized game in all of live service existence. It's fast-paced, it's blazingly fast-paced, it has hundreds of hours of content, a narrative that equals premium titles, and they play their own game. No, seriously, they play their own game. Every Thursday over on Twitch, they play Warframe, do giveaways, and interact with the fans of their game. Now, as mentioned previously in their comment, this is the most extreme example of how they've implemented player feedback into their games, and that was in their movement system. At one point, players used an exploit to be able to get through maps quicker. They would quite literally helicopter around through maps. Instead of patching this out, they saw how many players were doing this and completely overhauled their movement system and transformed the way that the game is played. Now there's wall running, sliding, bullet jumping, double jumping, flying, and more. With their movement system, they've got the idea now to give players more space to be able to use it. They opened up their maps and eventually gave them open worlds. They recognized that players want to play the game their way, and they could either stand in the way of that or they could use that feedback to make the game better, and that's what they did. They followed through with that same philosophy throughout the entire life of Warframe, and it's the reason why the game is still now in the top 20 most played games on Steam 10 years later. Soulframe is made by those very same developers and visionaries, and in that, there's a lot of reasons to have a lot of faith in the future of this game. Now, that doesn't mean that they get a free pass. Players love redemption stories, but we don't want to see the same things repeated by the same developer. Hello Games and Light No Fire shouldn't have to repeat the history of No Man's Sky to be a good game. Soulframe should be the culmination of years of technological advancements in gaming, all of their learnings in Warframe, the current trends in games that players love today, and a vision of what players will love tomorrow. As it stands, I see those flashes of brilliance everywhere. The atmosphere, the fidelity, the world building, the unique and distinct character designs and art styles that feel familiar yet fresh, the use of animals, alchemy, and your ancestors to build power and deliver a lot of different ways for you to be able to play the game. And Digital Extreme's early commitment to retaining the spirit of Warframe's monetization in their next title. With guidance and well thought out feedback, Soulframe could very well be another widely played and widely adored live service game made for an audience that is desperately wanting a game like this. Look, we don't need context. It's not necessary for us to look at something and say we need to know the background of the developer or the game or anything like that. If we see something and we don't like it, we don't like it, and it's as simple as that. However, at the exact same time, we've seen games that are dead on release, and we shouldn't jubilate over a game and its failed trailers or anything like that if we have the opportunity to be able to make that a better game. And that requires us to be able to voice our opinions and our criticisms constructively, because they can actually use that. Give them something actionable rather than just saying, nah, that's bad, I don't like it. That doesn't really do a whole lot. And that's something that I've tried to do better with, because I've done that in past videos, and I've tried to get better with it with each video that I've made, because I feel like there is an opportunity, and to be honest with you, there is an opportunity to be able to help make some of these games good, because some of these developers are listening. And it's crazy for me to say something like this, but my feedback for Warframe and the videos that I made for it did actually lead to changes in Warframe, or future changes that are planned for Warframe. Things that I've said, feedback that I've given that's been supported by the game's community, by people, by my viewers, by the fans of this channel. And because of that, we enacted a change in a game to make a game that we love even better, and that's amazing. And we have the ability to do things like that. That's why I think measured criticism is a good thing. But that also depends on whether or not these developers give us the kind of context to be able to work with in the first place. We don't need to worry about jumping to conclusions when you're not giving us any reason not to jump to conclusions. And I think that's the biggest issue that kind of came up with this whole Soulframe issue, was the fact that for all intents and purposes, there really wasn't a whole lot of anything telling players, hey, this is pre-alpha. This is more concept than concrete, like I said earlier in the video. And that's incredibly important to know. I think for a lot of people, by the time they heard that line in this video, they go, oh. Because then you step back and you go, holy crap, this looks beautiful for a pre-alpha game. It's absurd. Some of those animations, the art style, how clean some of these different environments and stuff like that looked, the space that you go back into to be able to interact with some of the NPCs and upgrade your equipment and change things and stuff, all that stuff is awesome. There's so many great things about this game, and it's only in pre-alpha. That's just crazy. And the reason why is because they've had so many years working on Warframe, so much experience working in that engine, that it was easy for them to be able to copy and paste a lot of that stuff, or take some of that experience and be able to do something even cooler with it. And that's awesome. And I can't wait to see what they do with this game. But regardless, if the combat stays the way that it is, I'm not going to like it. A whole lot of people aren't going to like it. And it's the one thing that has to change. If they change that, this game has a very, very bright future. And the only thing that I can say is, looking back at it, when I try to give something, I'm not a game developer, so I can't really tell them exactly what I want, other than I play a lot of action games. You need to play a lot of action games. And that's it. Just go out there and start playing some of these action games and see how they feel. Go play Final Fantasy 16. Go play Elden Ring. Go play Nier Automata and stuff like that. Go play games that have really good feeling action combat and see how you can reflect that in your game design. And if you can take some of those elements of those games and bring it into yours, Soulframe is going to pop off. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, drop a like on the video, comment down below, subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 100K. And yeah, that's all I have today. So thank you guys for watching. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. I'll see you guys in the next video.